In this lesson, we will learn about the password change replication in an AD domain related to PDC emulator role. First, we will learn about the password change replication in an Active Directory domain. Then we will analyze the logon activity of an AD user after the password change. And finally, we sum up the lesson with the keynotes. As you may know, password change from any DCs will be replicated to the PDC emulator of the domain first. If a DC cannot authenticate a user with its current password, the DC will forward the request to the PDC emulator before informing the user with the incorrect password message. Now let's take a look at the user A of the child domain hq.itlifeskills.local. Currently, the user A has a password itlifeskills, and on GPVDC11, we update the user A password to password at 123, and the new password will be replicated to OPVDC01 immediately because it is a PDC emulator. Now the user A logged on to his computer with the new password, and the authentication request will be sent to LHPVDC03 because it is the local DC of the user A. Because LHPVDC03 doesn't have the current password, so it cannot decrypt the authentication service request from the user A, and it have to forward the request to the PDC emulator, which is OPVDC01. OPVDC01 can decrypt the authentication message because it has a current password, so it respond to LHPVDC03 with the authentication response. At the same time, LHPVDC03 also update the user A password, and it forward the authentication response back to the user A's computer and allows the user A to log on. Before going into the detail, let's verify the operation master role holders in our AD domain hq.itlifeskills.local by running this command. As you can see, currently our PVDC01 is assigned with the PDC emulator related ID pool manager infrastructure master roles of the domain hq.itlifeskills.local. Now let's open Active Directory, Sites and Services. As you can see, we have three sites, Aurora, Chicago, and Elgin, and we have two site links. The first one is Chicago to Aurora, and the second one is Chicago to Elgin. Now let's open the first site link, Chicago to Aurora. As you can see, this site link contains two sites, Aurora and Chicago, and it configured to replicate every 3 hours, which means any change in these two sites will be replicated every 3 hours. Now let's close this and open the second site link. And as you can see, this site link is to replicate between Chicago and Elgin, which means the Chicago is a hub site and is also configured to replicate every 3 hours. Now let's close this. Let's take a look at this script. As you can see, this script contains three parts. The first part is to check which domain controller we are on and print it out. The second part is to change the user A password. And the last pass is to verify the password change time for user A. Now let's run the script. As you can see, we are on the domain controller GPVDC11 and the user A's password has been changed on December the 10th, 2023 at 8:27 a.m. Now let's take a look at this script. As you can see, this script only contains two paths. The first path is to check which domain controller we are on, then print it out. The second path is to verify the password change time for user A. Now let's run the script. As you can see, we are on the domain controller OPVDC01, which is the PDC emulator, and the password for the user A has been set on the December the 10th, 2023 at 8:27 a.m., which means the password change from GPVDC11 has been replicated immediately to OPVDC01. Now let's run this same script again. And as you can see, we are on the domain controller LPVDC03 and the password for the user A has been set on the December the 8th, 2023 at 7:32 a.m., which means the password change from GPVDC11 has not been replicated to LPVDC03 because LPVDC03 is just a regular DC and it is configured to replicate every 3 hours. To see the whole authentication process, let's do the Wireshark capture on the Ethernet connection on the domain controller HPVDC03 and we filter for the KPROS protocol, which is the authentication protocol. Now let's get back to the user A workstation and log on with the new password, password at 123 and hit enter. As you can see, it is logging on right now. Now let's get back to the domain controller HPVDC03. As you can see, there's a message back and forth between the domain controllers and the workstations, but it doesn't seem to filter for the KPROS protocol. We just need to hit enter to make it filter correctly. So before we going to stop the packet capture, let's get back to the workstation to make sure the user A log on correctly. As you can see, user A has been logged on successfully. So let's stop the packet capture. Now let's analyze our capture. As you can see, the workstation sent the authentication service request to LHPVDC03 and LHPVDC03 respond back to the client with the error message that it required the pre-authentication, which means the client have to send the authentication service request with the encrypted current timestamp. Now the client send a new authentication service request to LHPVDC03. However, LHPVDC03 cannot decrypt the message because it does not have the current password of the user A. So it has to forward the request to OPVDC01. Because OPVDC01 has the current password of the user A, so it can decrypt the message and process the request, and it responds back to LHPVDC03 with the authentication reply, and LHPVDC03 forward the authentication service reply to the client and allow it to log on. Now let's run the same script again. As you can see, we are on the domain controller LHPVDC03 and the password last set for user A is now updated to December the 10th, 2023 at 8:27 a.m., which means LHPVDC03 has the current password of the user A and it can process the authentication service request from user A from now on. Let's set up the Wireshark capture on LHPVDC03 and log on as the user A with the old password. Here we type in the old password, IT Life Skills, then hit enter. As you can see, we get the message the password is incorrect. Try again. Now let's get back to LHPVDC03. As you can see, we was able to capture the authentication attempt. First, the client sent the authentication service request to LHPVDC03 and LHPVDC03 responded back to the client to request the client to send the authentication service request with the encrypted of the current timestamp, and the client sent a new authentication service request with the encrypted of the current timestamp back to LHPVDC03. However, LHPVDC03 cannot decrypt the message because the password is incorrect. So LHPVDC03 have to forward the authentication service request to OPVDC01 because OPVDC01 is a PDC emulator. Now, OPVDC01 cannot decrypt the message either because the password is incorrect, so it's sent to LHPVDC03 with the error pre-authentication failed, and LHPVDC03 forwarded to the client with the same message to display the password is incorrect. This is the end of this lesson. Let's read the keynotes